put on YouTube, and they went insanely viral. And suddenly everybody really, there was this hunger for the deep explanations. Nobody here is stupid. Nobody here is a moral cartoon, even if actually, or maybe it's what journalism should be at its best. I don't know. It's certainly what I think is my goal.
Yeah, and can you remind me why is your English so perfect and unaccented? What's going on there? What years were you in the States?
Something like 9 to 18, something like that.
Okay, great. Well,
Jesus.
Let's start with Iran. Ultimately, I want to talk about the war in Gaza and the pervasive misunderstandings about it, and really just the pervasive misunderstanding about Israel's role in the world, place in the moral order of civilization at this moment. I mean, I have not been shy about linking the fate of Israel to the fate of Western civilization in its contest with Islamist theocracy. So I do view Israel, I mean, obviously Israel is fighting its own war, but I think it's also fighting a much larger war for the West. It's even beyond the West. I mean, really a war for open societies and liberal democracies. But we'll get back to that. I mean, those topics are unfortunately evergreen or virtually evergreen. But let's start with the up to the moment uncertainty about what is happening with Iran and what sort of assistance Israel is likely to get or not likely to get from the U.S. at this point. What is the state of the operation in Iran as you currently understand it? I should say we're recording on Tuesday morning Pacific time, and the 17th of June. And give me your sense of what's the current state of the Israeli operation in Iran, and what is Israel expecting the next steps to be, both its own and coming from the U.S.?
We have had, there are two ways to answer that. There's the 5 days of war that we've already seen, and then there's the 20 months of war against the various proxies that Iran built out essentially for this war, and they're no longer available to it. So I'll just zoom in on those 5 days, and then we can expand, out to 30,000 feet if that's useful. But the war began 5 days ago on Thursday night, so I guess Friday morning, and it was a culmination of decades of unbelievable competence and planning and the building of entire, there are factories in Iranian soil run by Mossad operatives, building drones that then took off at the moment at each hour as the Israeli planes were overflying Iraqi airspace, and took out a lot of launchers and a lot of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. Iran's great threat to Israel in this kind of immediate kinetic war is its missile fleet. It has thousands and thousands, or arsenal I should say, it has thousands of missiles, and they target our cities, and they've caused some damage in our cities already. But the great bottleneck for Iran, the Israelis understood very early on, and that has been sort of the foundational strategy for Israeli defense, is not even the missile shield, which is actually performed fairly well against incredibly big, incredibly heavy, fast-moving, long-distance ballistic missiles, but it's the launchers. They have a bottleneck of launchers. They have thousands of missiles, but they don't have thousands of launchers, and so if you can keep destroying launchers, if you can keep forcing them to deploy new launchers out of their hiding places and find them, the Israelis almost immediately, took out Iranian air defenses, what was left of them after the November operation last November, and gained air superiority over Iranian airspace, and have been just flying around Iranian airspace, tracking down those launchers while taking out many of the strategic assets of the Iranian revolutionary regime. That includes the chief of staff of the IRGC, and then 4 days later his replacement, the new chief of staff of the IRGC. It includes almost the entire leadership of the IRGC Air Force. It includes so many of the military advisors and people around the supreme leader. It includes the people in charge of the response, of the missile command, of all the things that Iran needs to actually manage a serious counter to the Israeli war, to the Israeli attack. And it's astonishing It's astonishing.
Yeah.
There are technological achievements here that America needs to learn from. For example, Israeli planes carrying missiles. Missiles borne by planes don't usually go ballistic. In other words, they shoot point to point. You point it at something and they shoot at it. They can sometimes track and sometimes not. But Israeli missiles, in order to increase the range of F-15s, which don't have the range to take off from Israel and fly all the way to Iran, so Israel has created missiles for these planes that when they launch, they go up into the higher into the sky, and then they glide down. They use a ballistic trajectory to massively increase their speed and still manage to very precisely target. Israel has put missiles on the wings of F-35s, which are not designed to carry missiles on those wings. So it's an air force of such astonishing competence and innovation that it's stuff Americans can't do with their own equipment. Administration of Iranian leadership to the point where Israeli intelligence actually engineered a meeting of the top committee to take place. And the answer seems to be that lots of Iranians, I know this is a shocking thought, don't like the regime. It's kind of an old multi-ethnic empire in that sense, of the old model of the Ottomans or the Austro-Hungarians. And the Mossad knows how to make profoundly good use. The Obama administration to the Arab world for decades turns out to be the paradigmatic paper tiger.
How do you, years ago, Iran, it would seem we could simply drop our bunker busting bombs to end this story. Really, I think just an endless number of explicit challenges and even combat maneuvers on Iran's part. I mean, Iran was killing U.S.
Innovative, brazen and bold, maybe because everything is at stake, is kind of the defining feature of the Israeli organizational culture of the Israeli security services. So, for example, the pager operation. Debate around the world was immediately a moral one. Is it okay to take out the 1,500 top people of a terror organization? Debate around the world was immediately a moral one. Is it okay to take out the 1,500 top people of a terror organization, or just an antagonist combatant in a war with almost no civilian cost, or is in fact the fact that that the Israelis are just evil monsters still, in the major media, was the astonishing brazenness of just the boldness of it. There was according to reports from journalists who were in the know on these things, there was a young woman, 30-year-old woman. Let's put it together. And so they pieced together the entire supply chain. Of a fake pager company that then had to go build specially designed pagers to put explosives in them in ways that would only detonate at the right moment. They had to actually develop one of the most difficult from a Taiwanese supply chain all the way through radios to broadcasting on the ground, And then you ask yourself, what would it take for the CIA to okay that kind of operation? To find a group within the CIA willing to put it, tens of thousands of missiles fell on Israel, rockets fell on Israel, and there weren't enough bomb shelters, and there was no missile defense of any kind, of any meaningful kind, for short-range rockets and missiles. The Israelis decided to fix that, and they began to develop this idea of the Iron Dome, which is kind of technically equivalent to shooting a bullet out of the sky with another bullet that you fire out of a gun. And the Iron Dome concept went to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon actually told the Obama administration that it's unfeasible. Physics doesn't allow for this to be done. Physics doesn't allow for this to be done. And there were advocates for this, whether it's AIPAC or in Congress. There were advocates in Washington that said, no, if we can do this. In other words, we trust the Israelis to be able to pull off this technological wonder. And enough people had enough of a leap of faith to actually, including President Obama, to actually put the kind of money behind it. And one of the things that Obama bought with that money was also co-ownership of the system and of the technology by the United States. in many, many ways, Iron Dome is representative both of the motionlessness of America and of this massively innovative kind of culture in Israel, because the Pentagon has a very hard time putting out R&D tenders and just having new things developed, crazy, wild ideas examined for their strategic advantage in war. And so the Pentagon almost has begun to treat Israel as a kind of easy R&D lab that sidesteps all of the bureaucracy of the American industrial, sort of military-industrial world. You have very, very few military companies that are producing serious military systems. There's not a lot of competition, and there's not a lot of courage in the bureaucracy to pursue crazy ideas. And the same is true in policy. You go to the State Department, and people are saying the same, just inane, empty pablum that they've been saying for 30 years, and that's how you get ahead. And nobody's willing to say something different, something a little strange, a little crazy, something that risks sounding neocon one week or a little isolationist another week. There just isn't a real serious... Whenever we encounter... I don't come from the State Department, I'm talking about people I meet as a journalist from the outside, but there isn't a culture of real debate, real discussion. I think that the monocultures you see in American elite academia is a similar monoculture that you see in American government. And so the Israelis are just out there to win. And anybody who has a new idea, a good idea...
You don't have any choice.
And by the way, the Israelis also have groupthink and catastrophic misunderstandings of the enemy. That's the story of October 7th.
Yeah.
But there's also the capacity to do the opposite. There's the capacity to really go after new ideas, crazy ideas, and try to pull them off.
So this operation was obviously years in the making. Why did Israel finally decide to act now?
I believe the official reason. It's not the only reason, but it is also a reason. Iran is nearing weaponization. Iran is nearing the capacity to take the enriched uranium, which during the Biden years, because there was zero fear that Biden would ever possibly pull a trigger on any kind of military response, Iran just moved ahead to 60% enrichment, which is very, very close to weapons-grade enrichment. And the weaponization program, the technology of producing a bomb and actually putting it on a missile, was very, very advanced. The scientists Israel targeted in this operation were not actually part of the enrichment system, they were part of the weaponization system. And Iran was going to have nukes, and the other reason was the missiles. You don't need necessarily a nuclear device detonating over Tel Aviv, 400 meters over Tel Aviv, if you could drop 10,000 1.5-ton missiles with conventional warheads on Tel Aviv. It would have the same damage to physical buildings. It would have, tremendous damage to people. Not the same, but nevertheless tremendous. Iran was on a path to produce massive numbers of missiles very, very quickly. And to actually be able to get past the kinds of bottlenecks that are allowing us to fight this war with minimal damage. So there was the simple timeline of Iranian capabilities, and obviously, unavoidably, there was the timing of the political window of the Trump administration. It turned out that Netanyahu and Trump saw eye to eye on the question of the Iranian nuclear program. Trump did ask, allegedly, according to Israeli officials reporting what they heard from the Trump-Netanyahu meetings back in the spring, back in March, Trump told Netanyahu, just give me a home run. Right? He doesn't want to have grinding wars in the Middle East that drag America in. But if there's a home run, he'll back it. That's what the Israelis were told back in the day, and I think that Trump now believes, and the reason he's willing to face down, the Tucker Carlsons on this question, is that he believes the Israelis came through spectacularly.
On your side, with regard to the U.S. coming in with B-2 bombers and actually destroying the capacity at those hardened centrifuges.
That is what everybody knows. And technically on paper, that is absolutely the case. And there was absolutely